And U.S. President Joe Biden has officially kicked off his 2024 presidential campaign. Biden spoke in Pennsylvania last night about upholding democracy and the dangers posed to it by former President Donald Trump.
The choice is clear. Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. Our campaign is different. For me and Kamala, our campaign is about America. It's about you. It's about every age and background that occupy this country. It's about the future we're going to continue to build together. And our campaign is about preserving and strengthening our American democracy.
And speaking to supporters in Iowa, Donald Trump fired back at Biden and criticized his administration's policies.
If you take a look at what he's doing on the border, or inflation, or our military, that horrible day in Afghanistan, you look at what he's done with energy, all throughout the world, we're an embarrassment as a country. We become an embarrassment as a country. The only reason Biden is at Valley Forge abusing George Washington's legacy, I mean, he's abusing Washington's legacy.
The U.S. presidential election is set for November the 5th. While today marks the anniversary of one of the worst attacks on American democracy in the country's history, it was 3 years ago that a mob of former U.S. President Donald Trump supporters stormed the Capitol complex in Washington. They were trying to stop Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential election victory. President Biden has blamed Trump for instigating the attack. Colorado and Maine have already removed Trump's name from the Republican primary ballot due to the January 6th insurrection. However, the U.S. Supreme Court announced yesterday that it will have the final say on his eligibility. For more on this anniversary, we're joined live from Washington by CTV News political analyst Eric Ham. Thanks for joining us here on your Saturday morning. So how will you remember that January 6th, 3 years and a couple months ago, sorry?
Well, it actually has not gone away. We know that there have been hundreds of individuals who have been tried and convicted for their participation in that day, but there are many who actually helped orchestrate that attack on the U.S. Capitol that have yet to be held to account. And so we are still waiting to see if there's going to be any accountability for those at the top who were involved in planning and orchestrating such an attack on the U.S. Capitol. Moreover, because we're heading into another election where we are already seeing threads of fascism course through the political dialogue, there's growing concern that we could see another January 6th take place during this election as well.
Right. There are some people who have been jailed, but they're already out of jail, some people, and some might be out, or they could have a new president by the time they do find the other people. And as you mentioned, the fear that this could happen again, and we're already hearing about Colorado and Maine taking former President Donald Trump's name off the ballot ahead of the primaries there, and the Supreme Court now looking into this as well. As you mentioned, don't all those factors kind of add up to potentially seeing something like this again once the general election does start?
It's interesting because Donald Trump has used the fact that he has been removed from the ballot in both Colorado and Maine, he's used it to great effect. But one of the biggest underreported stories of this instance is the fact that in Colorado in particular, these were 6 unaffiliated Republicans who actually pushed forward this challenge to Donald Trump being on the ballot. And so while we know that Donald Trump and his supporters have been pushing the narrative that this is a left-wing cabal that is attempting to try to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, that simply isn't the case. In fact, we know that many of the individuals that are actually leading these challenges are, in fact, not only Republicans, but some of these Republicans are people that Donald Trump himself endorsed for higher office at one time.
And of course, it may have been due to the date. It was yesterday that President Biden was speaking in Pennsylvania about the status of democracy in the U.S. And he was talking about how, President Trump is going to threaten this if he were to win this next election. But at the same time, you're talking about Republicans and how they're playing a part in this, and how you're talking about in Colorado leading them off the ballot there. The Washington Post, University of Maryland poll said that 7 in 10 Republicans say too much is being made out of this attack. So in terms of his base, do we think Donald Trump supporters even care that they're still talking about this and he's still being, taken to court for this?
I'm glad that you brought that up, because we also know that a quarter of the American electorate actually believe that the FBI was actually involved in setting up the January 6th attack. So what that goes to show is that there are still many people who are ill-informed as to what exactly took place and exactly who led the effort to try to thwart the effort to certify the election on January 6, 2020. And so what we're saying is clearly there needs to be more education around what happened and, in fact, who were the culprits of that. And I think what we have seen is Donald Trump has been very effective at muddying the waters so far. And the question will be, can he continue to do that leading up to November 2024?
And sticking with the election as well, November of this year, how much is Joe Biden, do you expect, is going to be focusing on this and the status of democracy and how President Trump could be a threat to that? Or at what point do you think that he then has to focus on other things like, the economy and people's jobs and things being too expensive and war in the Middle East and in Ukraine, support for Ukraine? At what point do you think that he may have to shift?
No doubt that there are still going to be massive issues that Joe Biden is facing, massive headwinds. In fact, we know that they're running up against a timeline to fund the government on January 19th. If that doesn't happen, the government shuts down. And that will leave funding for Ukraine, Israel, and, of course, the border hanging in the lurch. And so these are issues that Joe Biden has to get done. He has to find a way to work with Republicans to do this. But what we are seeing now is Joe Biden is going to clearly make this election and frame it about democracy. And I think he believes that's an area where he can win, particularly given some of the caustic language that we've already seen from Donald Trump.
All right. Always get smarter talking to you. Live in Washington, CTV News political analyst Eric Ham. Thanks so much. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.